Truly, let the games begin. It appears we've finally been introduced to every major player who has a large role in this season of Amphibia. Season 2, Episode 7, Scavenger Hunt and the Plantars Check In, while two separate adventures deliver one grand introduction into the one and only King of Amphibia, and likely a formidable antagonist, Andrias. And because his introduction was clearly the standout moment of these two segments, instead of doing my usual episode breakdown, I just want to focus and deliver all of my thoughts pertaining to this character, and how his entrance already raises some pretty big red flags. Of course, spoiler warning, if you are not caught up with Amphibia, please go catch up and then come back. With all that said, let's dive in. Our first glimpse of King Andrias doesn't involve his actual face, but still drives a crucial point home. He steps ahead of everyone else. Referring to the beginning of the game, once Anne and the Plantars arrive in Newtopia, complete with a chessboard that has wooden figures of Anne and Marcy, surrounded by armed frogs and toads. But notice the lack of newts, despite the loud and proud existence of the Newtopian army. Although, the newts could have been taught to ask first, kick ass, and take names later, Yunnan happening to be a very blunt exception. Or of course, all newts, despite their education and wisdom, tend to have violent impulses. But I only suggest this due to Triple B, with the brothers using a book on pacifism to smack each other around. So before we even get a proper look at this guy, the show wants us to maintain a level of skepticism and distrust. And that takes me to Scavenger Hunt. Fantastic episode, but for me personally, continues to raise a red flag, as the king sends Anne and Marcy on a scavenger hunt that ultimately spells out a message that reads, "Bring me the Plantars," which according to Marcy, is part of the course for the king. While this could just be a quirk of the king, loving his fun and games, I couldn't help but to feel uneasy. It's evident to me that the king isn't direct, and enjoys challenging others. Instead of just requesting the Plantars at his castle, he made it an entire day's worth of puzzle solving. Side note, I did enjoy how Scavenger Hunt developed Anne and Marcy's friendship. How Marcy is very analytical and observant, which can cause Anne to feel insecure about her own intelligence. But it also demonstrates how Anne is very social and basically a friendship magnet, which is something Marcy finds admirable. And I love how the show continues to hone in on different friendships, different aspects of friendships, and continuing to drive home the fact that communication is everything in any kind of relationship, but especially a friendship. But then we jump to the Plantars Check In, an episode that had me captivated from start to finish, but especially during its first act, when we actually get to see Andrias up close and personal. The first big takeaway? He's huge. And not just like a little bit bigger than the average toad, no. He is colossal, eclipsing the height of Anne, Marcy, and the Plantars combined. And although it was a detail I pointed out in the poster, I definitely need to address it here. There's visible and peculiar damage on his armor, conveying he sustained a large amount of damage, but from who? Does it have something to do with the amphibian depicted in the mural at the end of the theme song? Assuming that's not a potential transformation of Andrias himself. Despite his intimidating size, Andrias is very kind and courteous, welcoming the Plantars with a big group hug and treating them not just to a hotel room, but a royal credit card with no spending limit. It's apparent that this persona is very easygoing yet very energetic. He doesn't follow castle etiquette, much to the dismay of Lady Olivia. Andrias going as far as to blow a raspberry and mock Lady Olivia, a dynamic that immediately threw me off, because I definitely expected Andrias to be feared by Lady Olivia to some extent, but no. She's akin to an annoyed older relative who's been babysitting for far too long. And we also see that Andrias is a bit of a jokester, punking Anne with an empty fist before presenting the loaded credit card, a moment that I think could be called back to at a later point in time. Andrias pulls this off here as a joke, but what if he pulls this off later with a different artifact, like the Calamity Box, and this time the punchline isn't all that funny? Or maybe Anne could use it against him. Either way, remember this moment. Marcy appears to be educating the king on how humans, or more so teenagers, behave, considering he looked for her approval on his greeting towards Anne. Speaking of which, I really do wonder how close Andrias and Marcy are. How long has she known him? And how much is he encouraging Marcy to keep Anne in the dark when it pertains to certain information. I know I've thrown out there before the possibility of Marcy being aware of the Calamity Box prior to their arrival in Amphibia, considering she was the one who picked it out, and while their conversation in this episode still fits into Marcy's timeline of how when after Anne opened the box, she happened to warp inside the gates of Newtopia, the fact that Andrias pointed out that Marcy told him the gems were colored, something Anne didn't recognize, although that's likely due to Marcy being analytical, makes me scratch my head and truly wonder if there's more to that line of dialogue than meets the eye. Speaking of the Calamity Box, the gems' discoloration appears to be a surprise to Andrias, which further advances the narrative of the box itself. We know from Anne and Marcy's blue and green glowing eye moments that more than likely, the power of the Calamity Box was dispersed into the three girls, including Sasha, whom although her eyes haven't glowed quite yet, the eyes of the toads around her in reunion, save for Grime, had very peculiar glowing pinkish reddish eyes. Now I'm not saying anything about anything, but since Sasha is a person who influences others, I am saying maybe her eyes aren't the ones glowing. Of course, I suspect Andrias knows what the Calamity Box is, and may already have a decent idea what the discoloration means, considering his wooden figurines of Anne and Marcy, though I assume he modeled them after Marcy's picture of the three girls. But it could come as a surprise to Andrias, because maybe he planned to harness the power of the Calamity Box to himself. And Andrias is already speaking of a glorious plan once he further studies for information on the Calamity Box in Newtopia's archives, with Marcy assisting to decipher ancient Amphibia runes, effectively benching them from screen time for a little bit. They say it'll take a couple of days, and that could translate to 2 or 3 episodes. We don't really know. It's like Eclipse's trial in Star. Mention that you need some time to get it rolling, so that way you still have time to explore other plot points. Ultimately, I do believe King Andrias is faking out Anne and Marcy, at least to a certain extent, putting on a happy face to cover up his sinister motives. But you know who will be able to recognize his insincerity? Someone who can best him at that game, Sasha, whenever her and Grime storm Newtopia. Can we get another episode about that soon? I don't want to have to wait till the end of the season. But as always, these are just my thoughts, and I want to hear yours. What do you think? How do you feel about King Andrias? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, or tweet your thoughts at Roundtable Vids. And for more of my own thoughts, you can find me at Vox. We're also on Instagram. Help Roundtable grow by either becoming a member of this channel or supporting us over at Patreon. Link in the description. If you enjoyed this video, please throw it a like and subscribe to the Roundtable for more great cartoon content. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have an awesome day. Vox, signing out.